welcome to yet another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. Or should I say, CopWatch. As many of you may be aware, we've tried to branch out a little, diversify the show a bit, and also Francis is out of town for work this week, so rather than subjecting my wife Cynthia to military discussion in which she, laughs at me and wonders how I didn't go completely insane with how stupid it is, I figured we would talk about something more fun and interesting, which is copaganda and specifically American police procedurals. So this week, Cynthia made me watch one of the dumbest episodes of Law & Order I've ever seen in my life, and in which a podcaster is convicted of his podcast inciting murder, and many other things happen. So Cynthia, welcome to the show once again.
I'm glad to be back, and of course I would pick an episode about a podcast.
Well, yeah, so I don't know what the name, title, number of this episode is, but it's the current season because the fake CCTV footage in the episode is March 2022. And before we begin our discussion of the copaganda aspects of this episode, let me just say in advance, I used to like watching Law & Order in what you might describe as the golden age of Law & Order, the Lenny Briscoe days. In the late 90s, I want to say they showed it on A&E, and I used to watch it.
Look, A&E had Law & Order running all the time, and it was amazing.
Yeah, so we never had premium cable, but we had basic cable, and so I watched it on A&E and, got to know the characters and whatnot, and yeah, I remember it being pretty good, and now I realized...
Favorite ADA?
Say again?
Favorite ADA. If you're watching during the heydays, you should have a favorite assistant district attorney.
I can't remember the names of the characters. I just remember enjoying it. Was Olivia in Law & Order before SVU?
No. There have occasionally been crossover episodes, but she has always been an SVU detective.
Gotcha. Okay. I could have sworn I remembered her from regular Law & Order, but yeah, maybe
like
not.
I said, they do crossover. They have done crossover episodes before.
But I remember Lenny Briscoe's partner was a black detective, and they were always razzing each other for bullshit.
Yeah, he was played by Jesse L. Martin.
And he
always
was
famous for being in Rent.
Okay, well, Lenny Briscoe always wore these suits that looked like they would be like the guy who busted Al Capone's wardrobe. And yeah, I remember enjoying it. So anyway, this shit has fallen off in 24 years. My God. Now, granted, I think those Lenny Briscoe episodes were from the earlier mid-90s, but I was watching it in the late 90s. But about 10 minutes into this episode, before we even talk about the plot, I looked over at Cynthia and I was like, damn, like... Is the writing and acting this bad on every episode of Law & Order now?
I feel like reviving Law & Order. Look, season 21 feels really rough in terms of the acting. It feels like extra cheesy, far more than it was before. The break was really not good. It was not good.
Yeah. So the basic summary of this is... There's a sort of Jason Kander style Democratic candidate who's running for office who is agreed to have a sit down podcast interview with an Alex Jones / Joe Rogan analog. I would say more Alex Jones. He seems like the Wish.com version of the villain from the episode of Homeland.
I feel like it's a combination of both though, because, with Joe Rogan, you have politicians coming on his show to talk about, their politics and stuff, including Democratic politicians. So I feel like it's kind of a combination. And he feels, if you think about, the kind of the following they sort of suggest he has, it just, yeah.
That's way more Alex Jones. Joe Rogan's following is crazy, don't get me wrong. But I think the idea of it being so hand in glove with QAnon.
Not the QAnon stuff. I meant the size of the following and the fact that he's so, I feel like they're kind of pulling from Joe Rogan's Spotify fame and his YouTube fame. That's why I said I feel like it's a combination of Joe Rogan and Alex Jones.
I hold to my previous argument that if you remember in whatever recent season of Homeland, there was the Bergdahl subplot with the podcast co-host and the Ruby Ridge shit, the standoff in Idaho or whatever the hell, where the whole subplot about the crazy podcast or Alex Jones guy in Homeland.
I'm completely confused.
You watched Homeland.
I know I watched Homeland.
And there was the guy who had his radio station that was right-wing crazy shit. And he was like, 6 American soldiers died. That whole subplot.
Yeah, I have no recollection of this at all.
It's implanted in my brain because it is the first encounter I had with the sort of Bergdahl mythos becoming a pop culture thing.
Look, the only things I really remember from Homeland is that, the end of season 1 should have gone different for Damian Lewis. The child actors were not really very good, and it absolutely just made no sense timeline wise. All of the things that occurred from like her getting pregnant from Damian Lewis went to Iran, like.
Yeah, I just remember Damian Lewis saying the Shahada and praying, and like a British guy doing an American accent trying to do Arabic, and it was the weirdest voice.
Like, there's so many things about Homeland, so it is quite possible that I've completely blocked out the podcaster part because I do not remember
that guy was like the only difference between him and the way this guy is portrayed in this episode of Law and Order is that he was a little more country, but to me, like I said, it was, I call it the Wish.com version of that because it just seems like a less fleshed out version of that character. Anyway, so Wish.com Jason Kander is trying to do an interview with Wish.com.
Derek Hoyt was the character's name.
Derek Hoyt, yes, this guy. And then the guy tries to bring up QAnon, and the guy tells him to go to hell and storms out of the interview. And then his murder is witnessed by two guys complaining about how you get called racist online if you're on Twitter. And in the olden days, you had to square up to someone and say it to their face. It's then revealed that counterfeit Lenny Briscoe and the dad from Blackish are investigating because it's a murder because the guy was pushed in front of the bus, and they have video of it. They have bus dash cam footage. This guy was thrown in front of the bus by a dude, like a burly guy wearing a mask over his face and a ski hat. And roundabout way, we basically discover, if I remember correctly, they figure out that some posts were made on a sort of very, very poorly simulated like 4chan/QAnon forum saying that someone has taken out this guy, like the Democratic candidate, or aspiring Democratic candidate. And the
QAnon posts are a bunch of photos suggesting that he's engaging in.
Well, that's later.
Yeah, they figure out. But I think in the post, remember, he says
he's been taken out. He's no longer a threat. And
he says he's not going to do
it
anymore.
And they IP trace it to a cafe in Brooklyn where this burly guy is posting on his laptop and on CCTV footage. So they find him. He works as like a guy loading trucks in Staten Island or something like that. And it turns out he's an ex-Marine, and he was convinced from these forum posts to murder this Democratic candidate guy because he thinks that he was a pedophile. While forensics is scanning the dead guy's computer, it pulls up photos of him with young girls, but like they basically look like beach photos, but with random like preteen girls. And the police basically treat this like they're legit until one of the parents they're interviewing, the girls they find in the photo, is like, but that guy was literally never alone with our daughter ever. I know this for a fact. And then identifies that the photo is actually his daughter's social media post. And it's just her and her friend. It's been photoshopped. And then forensics confirms this. So we then determine that this guy murdered someone because, what basically looks like Mastodon.com 4chan is telling him that this guy's a pedophile and part of a pedophile trafficking ring.
By the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party is involved. The Democratic cabal, as they call it, is foisting this. And proud Americans are being told that it's racist to drink coffee or something like that. There's a lot of really, really ham-fisted ways to try to shoehorn this sort of like, these days, they used to say you're English, they arrest you and put you in jail kind of shit. Anyway, while consulting with his attorney, basically they get the murderer to flip and to plead to a manslaughter charge because they want to go after the podcast host for incitement, because they've determined that the photos of the Photoshop photos of this dead guy with young girls originated from an IP address from his laptop in his office in his billion-dollar. We're told numerous times he's built a billion-dollar media empire.
This is why I say it's more Joe Rogan than Alex Jones.
Well, I think InfoWars at its peak was neither of those is worth $1 billion, but like at its peak, I think InfoWars, until Alex Jones really like went under with nootropics and libeling the Sandy Hook families, like they were racking up a lot of money. And they also, I think, were doing the slick video shit earlier than a lot of people were doing. So to me, it was less Joe Rogan. I've only watched a couple of episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience, like the YouTube episodes. There was one he did with like an epidemiologist, and there was one he did with Bernie Sanders. I watched those, and like there was recently a parody of what Polish Joe Rogan would be like, and it's basically like, oh wow, that's crazy. You can install 2 light bulbs at once. Now, hey Jamie, bring up that footage of the dog eating a woman. That's basically more Joe Rogan's vibe. Whereas this struck me as very
well,
Alex
that's why I
Jones.
say I think it's a combination, because I feel like in terms of the reach and the wealth that they're trying to do and the media empire and having a thing, there's a sort of homage to the Spotify deal and that sort of stuff, and having that kind of gravitas.
It's also very funny because he has a corner office in a skyscraper in Midtown, which I don't think even Joe Rogan can afford, quite frankly. So anyway, they then charge him with murder because they argue that he directly instructed this guy. What was it? Was Salvador was his name? The man, the ex-Marine dude, the laborer who killed the dead guy. He's Hispanic, and I thought his name was Salvador, but I may have forgotten. Anyway, but then unfortunately, as the trial is progressing and the actual murderer is about to testify, he Epsteins himself. He gets hung in his cell, and so he can't testify. So they then basically play this elaborate not quite entrapment game, but basically like bait and switch, where a bunch of witnesses testify that actually this guy hasn't been inciting anyone, but they are able to go and get him on the stand, basically saying that like all he wants is a free exchange of ideas and debate that the left won't let us have.
Yeah, because he has a podcast, he can't possibly resist testifying in his own trial that he's clearly about to win.
And so he then testifies, and on the stand, they then get him because they secretly unearthed video they thought was irrelevant. So they didn't. What's it called?
Well, it wasn't relevant at the time based upon they had rested their case unless they couldn't introduce new evidence. They needed him to say it so they could use it on cross. And the evidence is basically indicative of the Romney waiter kind of thing, because it's, this waiter has taken this video.
It's basically secret video of him talking and saying that well, if one of these idiots kills someone, it'll be, the best thing that's ever happened to our media empire. Like, it's full on, Dr. Claw hammering his desk kind of shit. So then the jury convicts him. At one point during their research on the part of the prosecutors, one of the assistant prosecutors says, this could be huge. If we win this case, then we could prosecute Trump for the people who died on January 6th.
People who were murdered on
January 6th. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so he winds up the Alex Jones analog, the diluted darknet purchased analog version of Alex Jones goes to prison for second degree murder.
Yeah, my shortened summary of this would basically be, Democratic centrist gets killed by an ex-Marine because of a right-wing podcaster, and somehow the ADA in New York, in Manhattan manages to get the podcaster convicted in some parallel magical universe where this would happen.
Yeah, where this guy would ever even be considered to be charged. Yeah, because let's be perfectly honest. If this happened, the cops would high five the dude who did it, and no one would charge anything.
My first thing that I want to bring up is the whole reason this guy goes on this podcast is that he's going to run for Congress, and he is supposed to be, someone the Democratic Party, the DNC, is like super excited about. He's described by the right-wing podcaster as AOC with brains, but the DNC is not in trouble of losing a single congressional seat because they're investigating this in Manhattan, which means he lives in Manhattan.
Yeah.
This is not a place where the DNC is like, wow, we desperately need some hotshot candidates in Manhattan to hold Congress.
Yeah, they recently gerrymandered Manhattan so they don't have to have any black people because they really want they basically need no one to vote for them besides Hillary voters who earn more than $200,000 a year. So the idea that this is a hotly contested race.
Well, yeah, it's just sort of funny because, I'm just, my first instinct in watching this is like, no one cares about congressional races in New York City.
Yeah, the reason why the whole AOC thing was important was more along the lines that she beat someone in the primary.
Yeah, and she also beat an incumbent. So like,
yeah.
I just, again, and if this were to like unseat AOC, okay, but all the people who currently hold congressional seats. So that premise, picky thing, but I just found kind of hilariously sort of funny. And that one downside to Law and Order being set in New York is that when they try to do some of these heavy political things, it doesn't always make sense.
Yeah,
know,
because they're
Manhattan
prosecutors in Manhattan. Like, if this was being prosecuted in Staten Island, you might see some of the like inject bleach kind of crazy shit with Trump people. Like, not that those people don't exist in Manhattan, but more like you could get a critical mass of those people on Staten Island or really far out Queens, really far south Brooklyn, Riverdale, Spite and Dybel, places like that in the Bronx. But Manhattan, like, the thing about Manhattan that I think a lot of people are not aware of is that there's incredible poverty and incredible wealth condensed there. But north of, or put it this way, south of 125th Street, there are only 2 areas of Manhattan. So that's, if you think about that, that's easily, 3/4 of the island of Manhattan. South of 125th Street, which is a traditional sort of boundary of Harlem, there are only 2 areas where the median family income is under $200,000 a year. They are Chinatown and the area of the Lower East Side that the L doesn't stop at, like Avenue C and Avenue D, say between 14th Street and Houston Street. That's it. Other than that, like, that's not to say there aren't poor people there, but like the average skews so hard in that direction all throughout the island of Manhattan. So like, yeah, it would be more likely that you could, I mean, I'm just imagining you could actually have a more compelling plot where like the AOC figure is trying to unseat like the Connor Lamb figure and he has her killed. Like that would be more realistic, but that wouldn't have Alex Jones involved.
Yeah, there would have been options. I think what stuck out for me, having watched this episode twice, which was painful, is there is a lot of, complaining about cancel culture. For example,
really
you pointed out that, we start off with 2 men complaining about how, people are always complaining. They have, they have a guy say that he got called racist online because he said Jay-Z was overrated. And I was just very proud of whatever writer managed to get that Jay-Z line in. Good job. But there's a second instance later on where someone points out, because that's the first instance where someone says, you used to say things to each other face to face. And it's brought up later. And that feels very much like Dick Wolf is 75 years old.
When they go and they talk to the guy who winds up testifying in the defense of the podcaster, the guy, one of the cops tries to like play it up with him and says, like, you're having a cup of coffee. And he's like, oh yeah, it's not illegal yet, but someone might call it racist someday. Yeah, and it's just like, once again.
Yeah. Oh, there's, and you have all of those like subtle comments. You have this sort of whining about cancel culture, stuff. And and obviously there the cop is playing it up, but I feel like there are lots of subtle moments where it just feels like Dick Wolf bringing that stuff up. Also, Derek Hoyt, at one point when they're investigating who might have killed him, his wife points out that someone came up to them in a restaurant and bothered them, and they watched the video, and it's all very, very aggressive. And instead of it being, and it feels like a mark to like protesters and those people who've gone up to politicians. In this case, it turns out to be someone who's mad that Derek Hoyt didn't sell him his law practice.
Yes.
And, they were
like,
just...
we settled it like alpha males.
Yeah, we were alpha bros settling it. And it's just truly hilarious because apparently this Derek Hoyt was just a model citizen, the biggest saint. He loved being a husband and father. He managed to sell his law practice for 50% over the asking of it. And I'm just, there's just so many things that just don't make sense. I mean,
one of the things that I thought when we were talking, as we're still talking about the plot, is that him coming to the studio is, in the very opening scene, is treated as a throwaway in the sense that clearly if this guy, the podcaster, was trying to set him up to be killed, it does make sense that if he's communicating with the guy who's going to have him killed, that surely the fact that he brought him to the studio, knowing he was going to fuck with him and it was going to spike the interview, but then having him be in Midtown where this guy can attack him, where like he's going to know his location, but that never gets talked about again in the entire episode.
Also, why is someone who's apparently a darling of the DNC, like, please name me one darling of the DNC that would go on an Alex Jones sort of thing? Yes, there are politicians who go on things like Joe Rogan, but like if you have the full backing of the DNC and you're apparently their new golden boy, you're not going on a right-wing podcast.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think that, like Democratic politicians or, Democratic adjacent or further to the left of the Democrats politicians who have gone on Joe Rogan have gotten a lot of flack from like the guys who want to be buried in the Clinton sarcophagus. So like, you're right. if this is an establishment dude.
And I'm not necessarily a fan of people going
no,
on Joe
I understand the
Rogan.
arguments against it for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it's just hilarious because we're essentially sold this person as like basically New York's Beto O'Rourke, but he's for some reason going on Alex Jones, and no one really seems to know who he is because again, if you were this famous and you get pushed in front of a bus in Manhattan and you're supposed to be like the second coming, like the DNC, no one seems to care that this person was murdered as well.
It's because Hillary Clinton had him killed.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what the QAnon would say because clearly they were trying to make him the fall guy for their Democratic cabal.
The Clinton crime family decided that he was just too good looking. They actually the Clinton crime family decided because he wasn't a pedophile, they had to have him killed.
The other thing that I found interesting about as a long time law, I've basically seen every episode of Law and Order, some of them twice, some of them a lot more than twice due to reruns, is that there's one point where the Hugh Dancy, who was actually Claire Danes' husband, so there's a good Homeland connection for you. He's trying to try this case, and it makes no sense that he feels like
he also has the affect of a guy he's like a 13-year-old that got magicked into being a DA by a wizard. It's the weirdest thing.
He's definitely, in my opinion, one of the weaker choices that we've had for
he has this sort of like little Lord Fauntleroy figures it out kind of affect, and I don't think that's how he is as a person, but like his character.
Look, the best district attorney was obviously Sam Waterston, but Sam Waterston is now like head.
What is Sam Waterston's role now? Like,
I'll get to that, but my point was there's a scene where he's talking to his assistant, and she uncovers someone she uncovers the person who says they're trying to find some gotcha moment where they can find someone who overheard Jordan Reed, the podcaster, talking to the ex-Marine and encouraging him to murder. And instead the guy's like, no, they were just basically talking about like how much our country sucks now and free speech and the Knicks. And, so she's like, I have to give this evidence to the defense. And actually, as a longtime Law and Order person, all I could think was Sam Waterston would never turn that evidence over. In the good olden days of Law and Order, he would not have turned it over and it would have been found out and they would have been some sort of like,
fracas about it.
Yeah, and it would have been used as some sort of thing. But the new guy just turns it over. It's like, he's just like, she tells him he has to. And he's just like, oh, shucks, I guess I have to. And I'm like, what?
So I have to ask you again, though. What is Sam Waterston's character's role?
Well, remember, like, he's technically, like all of the people who try cases in New York, like, they're not the district attorney. They're like the assistant.
So is he like the Southern District, like the Preet Bharara of fictional Manhattan?
I think he's supposed to be he's actually the Manhattan district attorney. Those other people are like assistant district attorneys of like different levels. Does that make sense?
Gotcha. Okay.
So originally, the OG Adam Schiff was the best of, the head honcho in the DA office. Then we had Diane Weiss, but like, the best years were Adam Schiff and Sam Waterston and them arguing all over the time. All right. I miss those years.
I gotta say this. Sam Waterston looks like he's dead and he was reanimated from his wax figurine. He does not look that bad.
Sam Waterston, first of all, is 80 years old.
Well, that's the thing. He doesn't look that different than the previous incarnations, but he's so obviously old and stiff now. Like I said, it's basically a very, very lifelike Madame Tussauds wax dummy of him acting out as Sam Waterston, but like they haven't worked the kinks out yet. Like genuinely, I was so taken aback because he doesn't look that different than how he looked in the heyday, but
I mean, his hair is all silver now, but he pretty much looks very much the same. I feel like, he doesn't look...
Sure, but like, he's one step removed from Joe Biden walking through a door that doesn't exist level of like old.
Yeah, but I mean, I think the important thing to remember is the previous final episode of Law & Order that we thought was the end came out May 2010. And Sam had actually, didn't he leave before that? I can't even remember. So it's been a really long time since Law & Order has been on the air. And at the time they canceled Law & Order, it was actually hilarious because it had finally kind of found its footing again and had gotten good. And they had a spin-off, Law & Order LA, that was truly, truly awful and very like hammy the way that this one is. And it's sort of interesting that they've sort of resurrected this.
Remember when we lived in Brooklyn and we had that really tiny apartment that was basically one room? And you were watching an episode of SVU where like the plot was like CCTV controlled through the dark web. And I remember watching this and being like, this really sucks. But I remember SVU being good in years past.
Yeah, the whole point of continuing to watch SVU now is that Ice-T is funny and makes funny jokes.
Yeah, but I got to ask you two things.
Mhm.
How do you feel like this ranks in terms of copaganda? That's question number one. And do you think that Law and Order has always been copaganda?
Yes, of course it's always been propaganda, but you can definitely see the evolution. Like if you go back to really early Law and Order episodes, like I'm talking pre-Lenny Briscoe, for example.
Because it started in like the early 90s, late 80s, I think.
The first episode of Law and Order came out in September 1990.
Yeah,
so I've been watching Law and Order since I was 10.
So it feels like it's gotten worse.
Oh,
and
it's
it feels like
definitely
in the early days, it was more kind of like a homicide life on the streets kind of show.
It was Homicide on Life on the Street was always sort of a more serious show because like it kind of carried things through it. It was less like just an episode of the week kind of thing. But yeah, it was serious. Like one of the episodes of Law and Order I remember is one with Cynthia Nixon where she gets like sexually assaulted, I believe, on a train. And the people who she believes sexually assaults her are some like young black teenagers, but like they have a conversation about race and like they bring up, you know, is she just picking them out of the lineup because she's racist and all of these sorts of things, and they deal with like her being nervous. The original person who was the assistant district attorney on Law and Order, like he absconded to France because he didn't want to live in America. He's kind of had some sort of leftist views about things like that.
I wonder what that's like.
Yeah, seriously. And his assistant was black, and he's come back as a defense attorney. So like they've had definitely different episodes. You can definitely see that evolution of getting kind of cheesier and cheesier throughout the years. So yes, it does feel like in the 90s it was trying to go for this more sort of hard-hitting thing, and they were trying to do like rip. But the more they do the rip from the headlines, the more they've combined the rip from the headlines. I feel like it's gotten cheesier and cheesier because even SVU at points, like sometimes, you know, they'll just be a case and I'll just go, you know, you guys could have done 7 less things in this episode. And yes, it does feel like very, very cheesy in a way that feels too much.
There's the different spin outs of Law and Order. There's obviously, you know, SVU and now organized crime. And there was the LA one.
There was the LA one. There's a new one coming up that's going to be focused on, I think, like defense attorneys or just, you know.
It feels like, sometimes it feels like Dick Wolf's secret of success is he economizes by making the same writer's room write every show that Law and Order is involved in, because there's an extent to which it wasn't necessarily that it felt formulaic. It just felt like someone finished the first draft and handed it to them the minute they started shooting this episode.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when this first came back on, because I've always had a fondness for the original Law and Order, I was kind of hoping that it would be better, and it is kind of shockingly bad, in spite of the fact that I actually like all of the actors. For example, the person you call Budget, Lenny Briscoe, it's the guy from Bird Notice. Bird Notice was a deeply kind of enjoyable show. Anthony Anderson is actually very funny normally, you know. So it's, you know, Cameron Manheim from The Practice, generally also, again, very good. So it's a show full of like very good actors, but every time someone has to deliver a line, I'm just like, wow, I know that paycheck is good because this cannot be fulfilling work at all. And at all.
I seem to recall there being some more depth to the show in the olden days. I recall like a subplot about Lenny Briscoe's daughter.
Yeah, Lenny Briscoe's daughter had a drug problem and she eventually dies because of that. And like they had this like estranged relationship. Sam Waterston's character, it is actually notorious before he joins because, again, as I said, he was a replacement for someone before him for always sleeping with his assistants, and so it's supposed to be like a long-running thing, whether or not he is with all of the female ADAs.
Wasn't there like an episode where they basically had to, like, because of some investigation, a bunch of guys had to take a day off, and the episode was just sort of following them on their day off? I seem to recall something along those lines.
I cannot remember.
It may have been like a day off because like they were witness to a shooting or some crazy thing.
Well, if you remember, the original premise of Law and Order was to not follow the people home. Like, you know, it was
right.
Or the original premise was like
there was definitely an episode of SVU where like it's sort of Olivia's day. Yeah.
Well, yeah, SVU though is like actually the show that kind of shifted that the most. But the original premise of Law and Order was we are focused on the case, and like you heard little dribbles and things of stuff. Like you eventually found out about Lenny's daughter. You know, you find out about Sam Waterston. At one point, they bring in an 8080 to SVU who's the son of the original ADA, whose name I cannot remember at this moment. So you have like moments like that. Obviously with like Stabler, his daughter having a bipolar disorder and all these sorts of things. So they eventually evolved the show away from the idea of like not being all up in everyone's personal business, and SVU is so fully up into Olivia's business at this point that is, a function of the show. And so there is that. But I also think there just came a point of like these shows have been on the air for so long that people kind of want that stuff. So what's interesting about bringing Law and Order back is we're sort of back to it being about the case. Like we don't really know anything about any of these characters except for Sam Waterston because, he's been around for so long. Also, the other thing I'll say is at this point, the Law and Order franchise, like it used to be Dick Wolf's, bread and butter. It was the thing that, got him the most ratings. But at this point, it's really not anymore. Because he also, makes a bunch of other, shows. So he does the Chicago shows, which come on Wednesday. And I think Chicago Fire was actually like, the highest rated show for NBC
Really?
in May. Yeah. So I think the other thing too is that like, the Chicago universe he created is doing better. Although hilariously, he did try to have like a lawyer show in the Chicago universe and it did not take off. It was really bad. It had Carl Weathers on it and it was honestly, it reminds me of this iteration of Law and Order in that it felt so ham-fisted.
Yeah. Whereas like SVU takes serious topics, but it's gotten to be way more like CSI as time's gone on.
SVU has also gotten like in many ways kind of cheesier.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's gotten so cheesy. Like all the episodes of CSI Miami I remember seeing were just ridiculous.
CSI Miami was my favorite because basically every episode is just waiting for David Caruso to just slide his glasses off and just do his David Caruso like I'm looking down at you with your glasses moment.
And SVU is just basically for you're waiting for the moment that Ice-T is gonna be like the kids call it a unicorn frappuccino. Like it's just gonna happen at some point during the episode.
Those are the best parts of the episode. They truly only amount to about 3 minutes and the rest in the other,
So let me ask you, like, I asked earlier about how Law and Order stacks up as copaganda, and I'm interested in your perspective on this.
Well, look, I pretty much will argue that all cop shows are copaganda. You can look through the ages and see some sort of differences. And actually there was a tweet recently where someone talked about how like post 9/11, like we got rid of like the doofus cop, thing.
Yeah, the moron cop, bumbling cop thing, yeah.
But that has been gone for a long time.
I would say, you look back on stuff like Dirty Harry is
just
skewing it towards like the cop as the redeemer, the cop as the seeker of vengeance.
Even in a lot of doofus cop stuff, like think about the Police Academy movies, for example, like these are these inept cops, but they still manage to solve crime. Even think about something like, my best example I can think of something where like the cops are shown to be like completely incompetent would be something like Super Troopers, but they still also manage to like
and like the Blues Brothers, but the whole thing is it's ridiculous to begin with.
And so absolutely. I think you can absolutely look back to the 90s and see when you had this prevalence of cop shows. You had NYPD Blue, you had Homicide, Life on the Street, you had New York Undercover, and you see all this sort of evolution and stuff. And I think in the beginning, Law and Order was a little bit interesting because prior to that, you had cop shows and you had lawyer shows. So you had LA Law, kind of like thing, and you had Hill Street Blues. But what Law and Order was saying is we're going to follow, its big thing and its novel thing in 1990 was we're going to follow one case for a whole episode from the beginning. You're going to meet the detectives who investigate the crime and you're going to see it tried, which is actually a lot to kind of fit into an hour.
Yeah.
And so inevitably you'd watch the show and, it used to be on Law and Order, whoever they arrested first didn't do it. They would arrest a person, they were going to take him to trial, and inevitably they didn't do it. And the whole twist was Sam Waterston figuring out who really did it. That's why you watched Law and Order. That was what it was for. And this new version of the show is kind of missing that, Also, Sam Waterston was always just basically doing things that were totally illegal shit as a lawyer, not giving things to the defense, trying to hide things. He was always just,
So do you feel like its primary sin as copaganda is that it portrays the system as always being sort of invested in the right outcome, even if it doesn't follow the law?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about it is that it used to at least portray district attorneys and prosecutors as people willing to do absolutely terrible things to get convictions, which is true.
Sure.
So that part was on some level true, even though they were always doing it for like the greater good. But they were still doing, absolutely illegal things, not sharing evidence, all that sort of stuff. And we didn't really see the police doing too many, like police brutality things. Sometimes you'd see them, skirting away around evidence, but it's not like Blue Bloods, Danny Reagan levels of just absolute.
Yeah, just straight up brutalizing people, but for good reasons.
But I think part of it is that like it is a show that appeals more to like, it is a show meant to appeal more to Democrats. If you look at the entire premise of the show, and Dick Wolf himself is not really a Democrat. He has done some political contributions to Democrats. He very famously supported Fred Thompson in 2008. Fred Thompson was on Law and Order for a while, which was really some of the super awkward years and didn't work out well at all. So you can see that he's just sort of like riding that line of people who are on the center, both the left and the right.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I feel as though you could take the political framework of this episode and swap out the characters and make it a far left podcaster who somehow has $1 billion empire.
Oh, yeah. You could.
And the overall argument would be the same.
Exactly. It's trying to appeal to those people who are like, we need decorum and, you shouldn't be able to just go online and accuse people of things. There's this sense of we used to do things, we used to stand for stuff, and people used to get along. Even the candidate who dies, Derek Hoyt, he's just like, I'm on the show because like I believe we can work together. It just feels very like
it's like, yeah, my grandfather always told me people you had to work together. He practiced law in Boston for 50 years, and he said people have to work together. Every now and again, he hit a black dude with a flagpole, but you know what? Like deep down, he believed in everyone working together.
Right. So in this episode, it's like, well, the white cop says racist things, but it's just because he wants this person to trust him and tell him the truth,
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. So there's this sense of like, yeah, sure, they do stuff, but it's always in service of, solving the crime, and they're not going over the line. There's an episode, the one after this is actually one based around the Ed Buck case. And like, Cameron, in that episode, Cameron Manheim's character, she is doggedly determined to go after, the Ed Buck character. And, she has, it's like a thing that she like staunchly and deeply cares about. So I feel like in Blue Bloods, we have this idea of like cops who are, just not allowed to do the things they need to do in New York because of those darn Democrats. And in Law and Order, it's just like cops are doing their best with like what's available to them. And they're out there working hard and, doing all those things for, the paycheck as best as they can. But they really care about just, solving crimes and making sure that New Yorkers can go about their day.
Whereas I feel as though any encounter with the NYPD as a regular human being living in New York will quickly disabuse you of that. I can only think of a couple encounters I ever had with the NYPD. One was getting screamed at for walking my bike a little over the line so I could get clear on at a green light on Eastern Parkway, and a cop yelling at me and demanding to see ID and basically saying that she was going to give me a ticket until she saw my ID had veteran on it. And she's like, well, you're a veteran, you should know better than this. And then she let me go. And then one time I was at a restaurant with a friend. We were doing an interview, and one of the busboys was out smoking a cigarette with us while we were smoking, and he waved at a police helicopter, and a cop came running and screamed at him like he was going to murder him. And apparently I didn't know it's a crime to wave at a police helicopter, or that if a police helicopter is doing laps around whatever the fuck cops are doing, they have time to radio with like, oh, attention all units, calling all cars, there's a kid waving at us, and like they have to send fucking T-2000 after you. Like, it's insane. Those were my experiences as an adult with the NYPD, as a white dude in New York City. And when I watch Law and Order, it's a really nice, entertaining show for people in like the Chicago suburbs to watch about what they think New York is like and what the cops and, the legal system in New York is like. But it doesn't really have any correspondence with reality, both in how the cops and the DAs are portrayed, but also in like the social circumstances it's depicting.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it genuinely, the best way I can describe it is you have to accept that you are living in a slightly right of center political cartoon to begin with before you interpret any of the events of the episode. And and that like stuff's going to happen, like you said, straight pulled from the headlines in a way that often doesn't even make sense.
Well, they used to do better when they focused on one headline per episode, but now they're trying to combine about 7 per episode, and it has, mixed success. Like, one thing I find interesting is like the person who actually does the murdering this episode is an ex-Marine.
Yep.
He's an ex-Marine who firmly believes in QAnon stuff enough to push someone in front of a bus, which is the thing that should give everyone pause. But basically, they're just like, this poor man, he was just incited by this podcaster. And
he was manipulated.
Right.
A teen called him Chuggy on Twitter.
And then he managed to commit suicide. And it's almost just like this plot device that doesn't matter.
Yeah, he no longer matters to the plot, so they get rid of him by having him Epstein himself.
Yeah.
And
even Derek Hoyt, who they, is this like central character that's killed, like clearly they very much wanted to build an episode around convicting someone on the right who has a platform of inciting violence, and like very little thought goes into how to get to that point.
I have to say, I realize that there is a condensed amount of time for an episode, and I realized that like in their mind they probably figured they resolved this plot device by having Derek Hoyt's widow and what I imagine to be her mom watching the trial. But the fact that they go to her with photos, the Photoshop photos of Derek with young girls, and then say like, sorry, we found this on his computer, we need to talk about all this stuff. And then they never go back to her after they've confirmed that they were forgeries, made me feel like, wait, is she only now finding out that there are forgeries in the trial? Did she have to like call every single one of her daughter's friends and be like, I guess my husband's a pedophile, and then like no take backsies? Like, you know what I mean?
Well, but also, they wouldn't have taken that photo to her so quickly, because if you suspect that he does this, you have to suspect that his wife must
know or might know. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, first of all, the actual first step would be figuring out what are the age of these girls and are these photos real? So they go to the fact that they go and interview parents and things like that. The whole way that goes down is just like very, very
It's
off.
also very strange because obviously this is a broadcast TV show and they can't show anything salacious, and they'd rather just show a photo versus describe a photo. But like the best, if you didn't speak English or you didn't have the sound on and you're watching the show, it's like, this pervert takes selfies with girls at the beach, because like they're very anodyne photos. And it's just
and
like,
they look Photoshopped. This is the thing. Like the way they are, they look for it's him standing next to a young girl in front of a beach, but the beach background looks like it's one of those ones you stand in front of, at an amusement park. Like, it's so, there's nothing else on the beach but the two of them. Like, it doesn't even look like an Instagrammable one.
He's got his disgusting, perverted 25-cent like coin-operated photo studio in his basement.
Yeah, I mean, it literally looks like someone was shitposting and not trying hard to make a Photoshop. Like,
But there's an extent to which, like, that episode of SVU, I mean, I know, like, we're talking about this episode now, but, like, the CCTV sex dungeon controlled through the dark web episode of SVU that we watched, there was an extent to which I was like, is this some sort of, like, high art parody of Law and Order? Like, did they get pranked by their writer's room? Like, there was an extent to which it was so past credulity that I was like, what are we supposed to take away from this? Are they trying to represent that this is what they think the dark web is?
Look, SV was very, very into the dark web, and like, even more so, like Criminal Minds used to be, in Criminal Minds, you could basically just go and get someone murdered on the dark web. Like, you could just sign on and log on and do it really easily. Shockingly.
Yeah, that as a plot device seems to come up so often.
I just want someone to do an episode where someone just buys drugs on the dark web, the thing that people mostly do on the dark web. It's like, just have someone buy drugs and get caught.
Yeah, or like somebody have this plan to get someone killed on the dark web, and then they get scammed a bunch of times because they're logging into like 1995 vintage web 1.0 sites that don't load, and finally, like, after the fourth time of getting scammed buying Bitcoin to get someone killed, they just go and get a gun and do it themselves. That would be very funny and true to life.
I will say one pro of Law and Order that you don't see in other shows is that at least when they have to like ask their tech teams to do stuff, there's some sense of like it takes time. And other cop shows like Criminal Minds is the worst one with Penelope. Like, you just ask Penelope a question and she brings up magic databases that connect every database in the world, and she can immediately find out.
She basically does the plot of Metal Gear Solid 2 to get you the answer you want.
She's just basically basically like hooked in. She's like the hive mind. So I do appreciate that, like when they need to call Taru or whoever it is, like it takes some time. It's like so he's got to get something off a hard drive, or they've got to like break into a phone. There's some sense of a passage of time, and I do appreciate that.
I also feel like,
so that's one pro in their cop.
We talk about this sometimes about shows like Seinfeld and other shows where all the plots could be resolved with a cell phone and that kind of a thing. Like, all right, that's old hat, got it. But I do think that the advent of computers has been a really bad thing for the plots of police procedurals, because you create this sort of magic box that can solve any problems, or that like can invent hypothetical situations, and like unless you have never seen a computer in your life, you don't really go along for the ride when you watch this, like, because the story just it on its face is so absurd. Whereas like, some bullshit alibi, some crazy thing, like watching a 70s or 80s cop show where like it's probably more than a little racist, but like at least there's something kind of credible about that. Like the circumstances, it was mistaken identity, they hired someone, like the alibi actually checks out, like that kind of stuff that makes it more interesting, versus like, we're able to use this like 3D rendered panopticon shit to like pick somebody, like we have the exact IP address. Like, would you be better? Would be a thing where like they try to pull the IP address of the coffee shop and it's like, oh, they replaced their router and they don't have it anymore. Like that kind of thing. Like, yeah, for once, I want the computers to not work.
Well, this is also why in some ways Blue Bloods is a little bit better, because like you'll notice they rely less on computer evidence and it's more like CCTV cameras and those kind of things that you sort of expect. But yes, Law and Order is very, very good at just being like, we have pulled from this hard drive this exact evidence of things, and we've pulled your phone records with, your exact text messages, because everyone on Law and Order absolutely specifies their crime they're doing in email, in a text message, in, even the video they get of the guy where he's at some event and he's really just casually just being like, yeah, I hope someone goes out and murders someone. Like, again, that's why I also say, like, I felt like there was a little bit of like trying to make him a Joe Rogan sort of thing, because there's this gotcha, whereas Alex Jones would have just said that.
Sure, but also like introducing it for the first time in court, they would absolutely challenge it that it had been doctored, and they would want it to be submitted for verification. Like the whole thing with Mitt Romney and the, what is ever the percentage of people he says don't work or whatever, like that.
Don't pay taxes.
Don't pay taxes, that bullshit. It wasn't that was a court of law. It wasn't that was forensic evidence. It's that like it was obviously a real video, but like they weren't having to prove that to a jury. It was just out in public and it affected voters' opinions of him. But like in a court, like you could genuinely be like, I mean, I don't know if it would stand up, but you could make the argument in court that like because people had to, that this was taken surreptitiously in a state that probably has consent laws, like dual consent laws for recordings, that like it would be inadmissible as evidence.
It might be. I think the biggest thing about the recording, as I said, is, this guy was going to interview the Hoyt character and he was accusing him on his show of, being a pedophile and all this other stuff. Like, why would he have been shocked or why would he have any difficulty saying like, I think you all should go out there and take out some like of the Democratic cabal? It's sort of strange that we're told that this person is giving all these rallies and doing all this stuff, and the rallies feel again kind of harking back to like Trump rally stuff where he never says anything that incites violence. Also, like, the idea also to me that we're basically led to believe that the jury convicts him because of this tape, saying like, whereas if the jury's going to convict him on anything, it's because he doctored the actual photos, because, they were apparently sent from his computer, and his defense on that is, my door was open, my password was taped to my computer, and all
my employees are perverts and they use my computer too.
All my employees are allowed to use the CEO's computer. I don't know about you, but I have never used a CEO's computer any job that I've ever worked at.
Yeah, I mean,
and I've worked at jobs with like, not a lot of people, and even then the CEO didn't let me touch his computer.
I actually choose to interpret this that they were doing like reverse jury nullification because they're racist against podcasters.
Yeah, I did kind of pick this episode because of the podcast thing, because I was kind of curious to see how you would react. I will say your reactions were not as funny as the Blue Bloods episode. The Blue Bloods one, you were just furious. I
feel like Blue Bloods is competently assembled fascist propaganda, whereas this is just very poorly written. And so like this was stupid, and I was entering my Zen space to just like let it wash over me because it was so dumb and badly written. But it wasn't like Blue Bloods is like attending a church service where the pastor is convincing everyone else at the church service to kill you. Whereas this just feels like I said, like, it's not, oh, this was the first draft. It's like it was being written as it was being filmed. And there's a difference in the way it provokes a reaction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm just watching Law and Order because I still miss the Sam Waterston years of Law and Order. So I'm going to take what Sam Waterston I can get, which is approximately 2 minutes an episode and not really worth the 42 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
that I watch it. Also, every time I watch Law and Order now, I'm just sitting there because of Jeffrey Donovan and thinking I could be watching Burn Notice right now because it was a much better show.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, you can watch Sam Waterston just be like, oh, well, what are we gonna charge him with today? Like
Sam Waterston does not sound that
he's
proud.
so fucking haggard. He's so old.
The man is 80 years old.
Is it not proof that we live in a gerontocracy that, like, not only are all of our senators and the president and the Supreme Court justices and the most Congress people like septuagenarians and octogenarians, but also like we have to watch the same show over and over again with like the legacy characters who are now also in their 80s.
If Sam Waterston wasn't on the show, there'd be no reason to bring it back. They should have brought back some other people, and they do occasionally have them as guest stars. But if there's no Sam Waterston, there's no reason to be watching Law and Order.
So, like, Jerry Orbach is dead, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can't bring back Lenny Briscoe.
You can't bring back Lenny, and you can't bring back Lenny. You can't bring back Chris Noth because he just got the,
He was kind of on some sex pest shit, wasn't he?
Yes, he has been accused of rape by multiple women.
Got it.
That Peloton commercial
trying to not trying to minimize that. I thought it was sexual harassment. I didn't realize it was rape.
No, women, several women have accused him of rape. He has claimed that it is consensual. He has been kicked off the TV show he was on with Queen Latifah. So yeah, can't bring back him, who was, another, formerly beloved.
Despite their turn against cancel culture, they can't bring him on.
Yeah, you can't bring him back because that's just, he literally, I believe the show he was on NBC, but it might have been an ABC or a CBS show. But yeah, he got kicked off of that one, so you can't bring him back. They've already brought Stabler back, and given him his own show. So like we're in this resurgence of Law and Order bringing characters back. And honestly, I think a worse character being brought back than Sam Waterston is the whole Stabler stuff because that just doesn't work. But again, there's a nostalgia aspect, and I say all this, and yet, I still keep it on in the background while I'm working.
She still asks me to download her the episodes of Law and Order.
Look, I will just say, if you're ever working and you're annoyed with your coworkers, having Law and Order in the background is good because at the end of the day, none of my coworkers can be as irritating as Copaganda.
That is very true. So let me ask then, as we close out this episode. If someone were Dick Wolf curious and they wanted to get into Law and Order or give it a try, and perhaps they're younger than us, they don't remember the heyday, the golden age of Dick Wolf Productions, what Law and Order sort of era would you recommend they check out?
As I said, I think the best years are when you had both Sam Waterston and Jerry Orbach on. Just because
I remember Sam Waterston was definitely not on in the very beginning.
No, he wasn't. That's when you had was it Michael Moriarty? I cannot remember his original name, but yeah, he was not. Those ones are, if you watch the first few seasons, that's where I think it is a little bit more serious in tone.
I remember that. Yeah.
So if you kind of want to see Law and Order trying to be like take me serious show, go back to the really early episodes because Jerry Orbach is where he introduced like the cop puns and the funny things that people think of when they think of Law and Order. So if you go back to that sort of early thing, but if you're talking about like sort of vintage Law and Order that people enjoy watching, it's probably those Chris Noth, Jerry Orbach, Sam Waterston years. And I think when Claire was the ADA and like Abby, like those kind of like years were, kind of prime Law and Order. Those are the ones you were mostly watching on like A&E. Later on, you got some Jerry Orbach and Jesse L. Martin episodes, but those were those are the prime kind of.
My argument about the initial appeal of Law and Order, and I think I may have made this on our other Copaganda episode, our inaugural Copaganda episode, which you can listen to on Patreon if you are excited by this turn in the Hell of a Way universe. I said that the appeal of Lenny Briscoe was that he was basically like, it was like watching a weekly police procedural with Walter Matthau's character from The Taking of Pelham 123, this sort of like hangdog, take no bullshit New Yorker old guy. And I will admit there is an appeal. The Taking of Pelham 123 is one of my favorite movies. It's bad old days New York. It's beautifully shot. The action sequences are insane. Walter Matthau is hilarious. The villain is an English guy who is a pervert. Like, just his accent is supposed to tell you that he's a pervert, but also like he's like he had like a missionary band of South Africans. Like, everything about it is extraordinarily well done. I love it. And it is propaganda in its own right. It's just a feature film from the 70s. Whereas watching this, even in comparison with my memories of what Law and Order was like in the 90s, I am reminded of a metaphor that I probably use too often, that this is like drinking milk after eating a big bowl of ice cream. Like, it's just fucking bland and very unsatisfying. It feels like it should be illegal. Like, Sam Waterston's reanimated corpse, that should be illegal. And some of the plot devices and the one-liners about cancel culture in this, like, genuinely, it wasn't that I cringed. It's like I've developed scar tissue from cringing, and so I can't cringe anymore.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I would say I think the first 10 seasons of Law and Order are kind of enjoyable. Lenny's on till about season 14, and like post Lenny leaving, it's generally like bad. It got really good at the very end at around like season 19 or 20, and then it got sort of canceled and stuff. But kind of seasons 5 through 10, I think around like 5 through 10 is kind of when you have like the core, like it was funny, and like I think that some of the lines they're trying to recreate some of that stuff that they got from Jerry Orbach and like him making funny puns and stuff, but like it's never worked as well without him. Like Jerry Orbach was a very good actor. He was actually a very good theater actor. Everyone remembers him from Beauty and the Beast, but he was a really, really good actor. And, he actually really made you believe that he was a detective. And, I think that the really just over the top acting is so incredibly cringe now that even if they just altered that a little bit, it could help. But also, if I were an actor, I don't know that I could deliver most of these lines seriously. But everyone in the show has done good work in some TV show or movie or something that isn't this. They're all better than the sum total of what's happening here.
Well, I appreciate your expert analysis and your incredibly deep and well-researched understanding of cop shows across multiple decades. I come into this armed only with my memories of a show I thought was good, my fragile psyche upon encountering what cop shows are like.
Maybe we should do a vintage show next time, just,
And my ability to make up imaginary bullshit and fill an hour of content. So for those of you out there listening, thank you so much for being listeners. If you want to hear more CopWatch, we have one bonus episode of it on the Patreon, and we're going to try to do at least one of those per month on top of our regular Hell of a Way stuff. Obviously, this show is normally very different in tone. We will be back with a regular episode next week. However, if you want to hear bonus content dating all the way back to 2016, it's a long time, that's available at the $5 tier on our Patreon, and there will be a link to that in the show notes. And so, as ever, I have been Nate Bethea.
It's Cynthia, Nate's wife.
And this has been CopWatch, and we will talk to you very, very soon. Thanks.